by Ian Shaw. And just a brief introduction to Ian Shaw for those of you who haven't met him before. Ian is a stalwart of Irish and Connacht and Galway athletics, associated for many years with Athenry Athletics, a member of the Connacht provincial board, a member of the competition committee of Athletics Ireland, and also the technical committee of Athletics Ireland. Ian reliably informs me that this is his 48th year in athletics, an ex-sprinter who found shot putting after an injury. He's competed as a master athlete. He's now a coach, an official, and an administrator. Known to many of you as a photo finish judge, competition organizer, and coach to many of the throwers in the Galway area. Ian most recently has achieved the World Athletics Competition Director qualification following assessment and a course that was taken there. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Ian. We will take questions, just a little bit of housekeeping. We will take questions throughout. If you've got a question, just pop it into the chat, and if it's a natural pause, we'll take it there. And we will have questions and answers at the end of the webinar. I'd ask you to leave your microphones on mute so that we're not talking over each other. And without further ado, Ian, you're on mute because I've muted everybody coming in, so I will hand the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and thank you everybody for joining this evening. Yeah, it does sound like with all those roles that that's all I do, but I do actually work as well. So my boss might think it's the other way around, that I sometimes come into work to escape from my athletics. Right, I have a little presentation which I will put up on the screen. So we are talking today about shot put. So I'm assuming we can see that on the screen there, Jackie?
We can.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, we're going to talk about shot put, and if I can get to there. So what we'll do this evening, we'll just go through in order about what the equipment is involved in shot put, how you would set up the shot put site, what the judges are and what the judges do, what their roles and responsibilities are, and then we'll go through the actual competition, the warm-up and the actual throw. And as we go through all of those aspects, we'll look at the various rules of competition, and we will mention a couple of non-rules of competition which people believe are rules but aren't rules, and then recording the result. And finally we'll finish off. I have 3 scenarios relating to shot puts, and if we have time, what we will do is we might pose those scenarios, and I will turn the tables and look for people to sort of give their opinion on what those what the outcome of those scenarios are. So what I do want to talk about first, before we start anything about the actual competition, is talk about safety. Shot put involves throwing big, heavy balls of metal, and in doing so, it becomes a dangerous sport. You only have to do a Google search for shot put official death, and you will find hits on there of even fairly recent incidents where officials have actually been seriously injured or indeed fatally injured by being hit by a shot. I have a sort of mantra which I use all the time. I definitely use this in training, and I often use it in competition as well, is the words heads up or heads off. So at any time that anybody is throwing a shot, every official, doesn't matter what their role is in the shot put competition, should be having eyes on the person throwing the shot and seeing where that shot lands. Now, I've been hit by a shot. I've been hit by a 2 kg shot by my youngest son in training because I sort of completely ignored the heads up or heads off rule, hit in the sternum, cracked my sternum. I went down like a sack of potatoes, couldn't breathe, thought I was going to die. Now, okay, I was being a bit over dramatic, but and I did get up, and I've never let my son down, let my son forget about that. 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, we had an official in day 2 of the league was hit by a 16-pound shot. Fortunately, he took a lot of the brunt of that on his arm, but it also hit him in the chest. He went down as well, and I thought that we would get to that official and that official would be dead. Such was the force that this thing will actually hit you with. So I can't overemphasize the safety involved in always being aware of where the shot is during the shot put competition. So let's talk about the actual the shot put equipment itself and the implement. So some of these things are taken from the World Athletics Rulebook, and so this is, you know, as a standard, the shot build should be iron, brass, or any other hard metal, or a shell filled with lead or other solid material. It should be spherical in shape, and that's one thing as an official what you should be looking for if you're ever examining a shot. Make sure it's still round. These do get battered, and if you look at that photograph I showed earlier on, they're kind of fairly battered, those shots. They tend to get thrown into the back of vans on top of other shots, and they do get dints and dents in them. The surface finish should be smooth, but again, you don't want that to be overly smooth. For anybody who buys a brand new shot, I would actually suggest you sort of buff the outside of the shot with a bit of sandpaper or something, just to take off that overly smoothness of it. And again, if a filling is used, and you can get shots which can be refilled, that the everything that goes put inside the shot should be immovable and complies with the requirement of the center of gravity. And I'll just talk about that first. Is what you do want is you want the center of gravity to be in the center of the shot. And we do actually have a piece of test equipment, which is in our shot put test or our throwing equipment, test equipment. And what it is, it's like I'm trying to think how to describe this. It's like the inner part of a toilet roll, but in metal, very thin metal, where you would put the shot put on the top of that, and it gets lifted up into the air. And if the center of balance is off, then it will fall off the toilet roll holder. That's a shot which is out of balance, and you don't want that. So you want a good center of gravity. From a point of view of actually throwing the shot, it's also good to have a very, very, very good center of gravity. There are people that sell shots which say they have a perfect center of gravity and guarantee they will go 10 meters further than any other shot, but I don't really buy into that. So if you're coming to a competition, you know, or if you're the official who's actually checking out the implements, there are a set of minimum weights and diameters based on the size of the shot. And you can see here, these are the standard, like in what I'd call international implements. So for under 18 women, 3 kg, under 20 women, or senior women, 4 kg, under 18 men, 5 kg, under 20 men, 6 kg, and for senior, 7.26 kg. They do have a minimum maximum diameter, and again, you in the test kit there are ways that you can actually measure these diameters. One thing which people talk about is what is allowed in terms of the weight. So if you are checking in a 3 kilo shot, and that shot weighs in at 3.000 kilograms, that shot's good. That shot meets the criteria of the weight of that shot. If that shot weighs in at 3.001 kilogram, that's a good shot. If that weighs in at 2.999 kilogram, that shot has to be rejected. So the calibration equipment we use is calibrated to an accuracy which allows you to do this. There is a belief that you should allow a tolerance. So, you know, you should be allowed for a 3 kg shot, you know, if it's less than 3.005 kg, you should discard it. But no, as long as your equipment is calibrated, 3.000 kilograms is good. And of course, the most important thing is that all implements are actually scrutinized before the competition, before they actually go out to the athlete. And we have a practice here, which is the shot put would actually be brought for scrutiny. It will be weighed, its size would be checked, its center of balance would be checked, a little sticker would be put in there, it would be signed, and it would be held back in the pool. and then it will be delivered to the site of competition when the competition starts. Obviously, we have other weights of shot puts that we would use here in domestic competition. Say, for the under 12s, under 13s, there will be 2 kg. Then we have the 2.72 kg. Within the measuring equipment, there is actually all of the tolerances for those shots. Indoors, here in Ireland, we do actually use as routine soft vinyl shots or plastic shots or rubber casing shots, again at the same weights that you would have had beforehand. And the one that you will find is that because these shots have got quite a thick outer shell and they have to be filled, the actual minimum maximum diameters are actually different to a metal shot. Now, what people don't realize is that you don't have to use a rubber shot indoors and a metal shot outdoors exclusively. You can use, and if you go to international competition, you will see that the metal shots are actually used indoors. But that depends on you actually having a sufficient floor that can actually take that shot. So what they say here is that the flooring is good enough, is no damage is caused when it's landed on a standard normal sports hall floor. So if you're throwing a metal shot and it's causing damage, then you shouldn't be using that indoor. But in all of the venues that we use, they actually have the big thick blue mats, which actually will allow you to throw metal outdoor shots indoors. But the rule here is what you can't do is you can't use both types of shot. So a rubber vinyl shot and a metal shot in the same competition. So if anybody saw this year in the national seniors, we actually did this for one of the, maybe the first time, where we used metal shots inside in NIA, and there was no problem with that. In fact, actually the athletes quite enjoyed the fact they were able to use the shots they would normally train with. The one problem is if you use a 145mm shot, which is one of the rubber shots, it actually feels like you're holding a beach ball when you're actually throwing that. So to be able to use the metal shots is the athletes do prefer that. And again, the important thing is when you are indoors is that the landing sector does allow you to be able to see an imprint of the shot where it's landed, and also that any bounce is actually minimized. So we obviously want to know where it lands. Outside in the mud and the grass, it's easy. You often see where it lands, but sometimes indoors it can be hard. If athletes put chalk on the shot, it's actually quite easy on those blue mats to see where it's actually landed. So in terms of the competition area, so we'll go from left to right here. So this is the circle. So the circle is 2.135 meters in diameter. And for anybody who is wondering why it's 2.135, well, 2.135 meters is actually 7 feet in imperial distance. So the shot put circle was always 7 feet across. At the front, you have a sector which is 34.92 degrees, and we have sector lines which come out of that, which are 50mm wide. There's also a line put in the middle, which separates the front from the back of the circle, which again is a 50mm wide line and extends for 75 centimeters to either side. So, I think we're all used to seeing what a circle looks like, but those are the actual dimensions that you would be working with. So you are come to competition and you have to lay out a sector. So what's the easiest way of doing that? Well, if you've turned up to lay out the sector, the best thing to do is go and get 2 friends and 3 tapes. So this is the way you do it. So you have 3 people and 3 tapes. You have a person who stands in the middle of the circle and they hold 2 of the tapes. One person will run that out 20 meters. The other person will run on the other side out 20 meters. And they're looking for a point where when they get to 20 meters, those 2 sectors are 12 meters apart. And we call it the 20-12-20 rule. So sector line on the left-hand side out to 20 meters, sector line out on the right-hand side, 20 meters. Look for the point which is 12 meters apart. And then what you might need to do is a bit of orientation to make sure that you actually are not offset on the toe board, but the sector lines roughly run out the middle of the toe board. So you can see here on the right hand side, this is one I set up last week when we were going training, and I ran the sectors out, and you can see that how the sector lines extend out past the toe board. One thing I noticed when I'd actually ran that out, it kind of looked off to me, and you probably can't see it from the photograph, but it didn't look right. And I realized what I'd done is I'd run the tape out on the left-hand side, and I'd put the sector line on the outside of the tape. But the sector line on the right-hand side, I'd put the tape out and it measured my 20 out and 12 across, but I'd put the sector line on the inside of the tape. So when you're actually setting up the circle, you run out 20 meters either side, 12 meters across, and then put your sector lines on the outside of the tape, because you've been measuring 12 meters across, and so that is from the inner line of the left-hand sector to the inner line of the right-hand sector. So that is why my sector lines looked a kind of bit off, because I put one on the outside of the line and one on the inside of the line. And then you're good enough to go. So, shot put officials. Ideally, how many shot put officials would you have? Well, ideally, if you listen to the World Athletics, if you listen to the look at the World Athletics rules, it says 10. I think it's a long time since I've seen 10 officials at one of our competitions. You obviously just don't have that many officials, and I just talk through what those officials are. So number one is the chief judge, and the chief judge should really be the person that allocates the duties for all of the other judges and officials that turn up at the event. The chief judge is also the person that holds the flags. The chief judge is also the person that checks the measurement, and it's the chief judge that will raise the red flag if it is a foul, the white flag if it's a good throw. They are supported by judge number 2, who is checking the throw validity. So they're checking for, has the throw been made in accordance with the rules. Judge 3 and 4, they're the people actually marking where the implement has landed. So judge number 3 is a person that will spot where the shot has landed, point it out, and judge number 4 will actually put the spike in. So if they're using a tape, that's where the tape will run from. Or if you're using an EDM, that person will be holding the prism and they'll be able to take an electronic distance from that point. Judge number 5 is the person that picks up the shot and rolls them back. Notice how I said that's the person that rolls the shots back. They don't throw the shots back towards the circle. 6 is the person, if you're using a tape, will actually pull the tape through the center point of the circle, so that whoever is actually measuring the distance can actually read that distance, and the distance is read from the inner point of the toe board. Judge number 7 is the recorder, so they'll be recording the result which is called out, and they also have a responsibility for calling the athletes in order. 8 is what I call the athletes judge, and again, this is one that we don't really have, but you do see in international competition. They will look after the athletes. If the athletes have any questions, any concerns, that person will usually be the first point of contact for the athletes. Judge 9 is the scoreboard judge. They will be, if they're using a manual scoreboard, they'll be the person putting the number of the athletes, what round of the throw it is, what the score is, and showing that to the athletes, the coaches, and the audience. And judge number 10 is the clock judge. So the nice thing about shot put in comparison to the high jump, which we heard about last time, is that the time for each trial is 1 minute. And so all they have to do is start the clock at 1 minute, and when that counts down to 15 seconds, clock judge will raise the yellow flag to indicate there are just 15 seconds left to go before the athlete has to start their trial. So just a few things here. It's best if the judges can be seated. Now, some of the judges can't be seated. Okay, so judges 3 and 4 really can't be seated. You want to be able to give the athlete, you know, a nice clear view. You don't want the officials to really be distracting, you know, walking around or fidgeting or picking up a mobile phone or something like that, so which could be causing the eye line. But also, it's nice if officials can give a nice, although the primary role of the officials is to make sure the competition is carried out in the correct manner and a correct distance is marked, you also have to be aware that there are coaches watching, there are spectators watching, and to be able to give them a good view, ideally unobstructed view of what is actually going on, particularly in the circle, is important to do that. Although it should never be done at the expense of not being able to judge the competition correctly and get an accurate distance. Likewise, with the scoreboard judge, it's very nice if you're using electronic, it can be seen by everybody, or if it's manual that has to be turned round, it is turned round in a point where everybody gets a chance to see either what the athlete number is or whether it can be seen what the score or what the mark was that the athlete has set. Also, if just making sure that the scoreboard doesn't obstruct the view of the circle, of the landing sector for the spectators and for the coaches. Right, so in reality, this is probably what we do actually get. You know, in most of our competitions, we will have a chief judge who has the flags. We will have a recorder. We'll have somebody who checks the throw validity, and we will have somebody who puts the spike in and somebody who returns the implement. This is probably the minimum that you need. Now, what I would say is if you're using a tape, you probably do need an additional person who actually pulls that tape through the center of the circle. Though often I've seen this where the recorder is also the person pulling that back. But really, probably 5 people is the minimum that you need to run that competition. And again, as I said earlier on with safety, some of these officials are in the firing line of that shot. So when an athlete enters the circle and they're about to throw, all eyes should be on that athlete and they should be seeing where the shot goes. So a warm-up. So each athlete may have a single official practice throw, and that practice throw is always under the supervision of the judges. And I think this is an important point, and that single official practice throw should also be made from the circle. It shouldn't be allowed to be made from anywhere else, so from the circle. Now, it is, I mean, and throwers often complain about this. You know, if a hurdler is warming up, they can have 15 runs over a hurdle, and they're usually sort of provided in the warm-up area. If you're a sprinter, you can go and warm up for 2 hours sprinting up and down a track. It's very hard, particularly in an indoor arena, that the athletes get chance to actually throw that implement. So although each athlete may have a single official practice throw, I think a bit of common sense has to be used here at times, and you may allow a second throw, or you may allow a third throw if there's a small group of athletes, say for example in the seniors or for some of the older ages, you might only have 2 or 3. And we often let the athletes have, you know, as many warm-up throws as they want, as long as it's not impacting the length of the duration of the competition. But every athlete is allowed a single official practice throw. Now that practice throw is for the athletes, but it's also a really key thing for the officials. So if you're observing what the athlete is throwing, you will note whether you've got an exceptionally long throw coming from the athletes, and you will know that when that athlete comes into the circle to complete their throw, you probably need to stand back, you know, a fair way so you can actually see where it lands. If you are also seeing somebody who's thrown an incredibly short distance, you know that you probably need to walk forward so that you can actually see where that, you know, that shot lands. So that's a help for you. Also, it gives you a chance to observe the actual athlete themselves. the athlete might be doing something which is not a correct throw, and you have the chance to sort of keep an eye on somebody. You know, if somebody is, and we'll go on to the throw itself in a second, but if somebody is pulling the shot away from their neck repeatedly, then you can note that. And I often note on a scorecard something like neck or arm to give me an idea that, you know, you need to be careful and look out for this. You know, again, common sense, you know, maybe something which you might want to say to an athlete. Just be careful of the neck. And they often will take that in a, you know, in a good way. Athletes are also allowed to place one marker in competition for the shot put, and you will often see athletes who will dry a shot and they will throw their towel to a particular point. And you know, something that I always coach my athletes to do is, so they can actually focus their eyes, is to dry a shot and to throw it at the back of the circle. Now that's actually their one marker. It also means that once they've completed their shot, their throw, they can go and pick that one marker up. Please be aware of athletes who decide to kick that marker out of the way of the athletes. They shouldn't really be doing that. And it is worth sort of, if it's a repeat offender, having a word with them. But an athlete is allowed to put one non-permanent marker down in the competition. So the throw-in order. So the throw-in order, when you get your scorecard, it's made in lots, drawn by lots. So for most of us now using the athletics manager system, that's pressing a button which allows the random assignment of the athletes. They're not seeded. The order is printed and written on the scorecard. As I said before, the warm-up throws are actually taken in competition order and from the circle. And in the actual competition itself, the good practice to have is for the judge to call the athlete to throw and then announce who is to follow. So it might be Ian Shaw to throw, Jackie Mulhall next. And that athlete then usually gets up and is aware that they have to throw. And so as soon as that athlete is called and the competition area is clear, that's when the 1 minute would actually start for that athlete. Quite often you will see that an orange cone is placed in the middle of the circle, and once that is removed and the athlete is ready to go, that's when the 1 minute starts. Now, this is an important point, and this often happens, and I saw it happen at the weekend. So if an athlete is entered into a track event so that they have what's called a simultaneous entry, the referee may allow them to throw in a different order to be able to accommodate this. So if you've got 15 athletes on there and athlete number 2 is actually going away to hurdles, the referee may allow that athlete, say, to be put into position, say 15 or 16 or something like that. But if the athlete does not return before that round of trials has been completed, then they will be considered to have passed and they will not be allowed to take that throw in that round. You know, that the clock will run down, so that the athlete will be called, the clock will run down, just in the case that, you know, you call the athletes and they were just coming back from taking their spikes off from after doing their hurdles, that they do get a chance to come on and do their throw. But once that clock has run down to 0, then that trial will be counted as a pass. Now, the only time where this doesn't apply is in the very last round of competition, and the order that you are in the round in that competition, in that round of the competition, stays. It doesn't matter if an athlete has to go to a track event. You are not reordering or you're not giving them a different order to throw in. It has to be the order which is on the card for which they throw in. So here's some rules, and so what we'll do, we'll just go through the rules as they are in the book, and then we'll just show some pictures to illustrate this. So an athlete shall commence their trial from a stationary position inside the circle. This is really important. What you don't want to have is a situation where an athlete runs into the circle and gets that extra momentum from running into the circle and then throws their shot. So they have to enter the circle and actually commence their trial from a stationary position. The standing in the stationary position is not the start of the throw. It is the action after they've assumed their stationary position, which is actually their throw. The shot put athlete, and this is a general, not just the start, an athlete can touch the inside of the rim and can touch the inside of the stop board or toe board, and that's no penalty there. And we can come on and we can talk about this more and show some examples. Now, this is important because we often see people talk about this, that you have to enter the circle from the back of the circle. Well, that there is no such rule which says you have to enter from the back of the circle. You can enter the circle from whichever direction you want. You can walk over the toe board. You can walk over the ring if you like. There's no problem with that. And so, give you some examples here. This is Thomas Stanek, and Thomas always walks into the circle from the front. So from in the sector, he will walk to the circle. He almost every single throw will then rest his heels on the top of the stop board, and then he will go to the back of the circle. He will kick his toe into the rim, and he will assume his stationary position. Every one of those things is in full compliance with the rules, and there's no foul there at all. So he can enter to the front, he can trample all over the toe board, and he can have his foot up against the ring. Not over the ring, but he can have his foot on the ring. And that end diagram there that's just to show, right, is that, during the throw, right, is if you're touching the inside, that inner face of the stop board, that's also a valid throw. The shot shall be put from the shoulder with one hand only. At the time an athlete takes a stance in the circle to commence a shot, the shot shall touch or be in close proximity to the neck or the chin. And then the hand should not be dropped below the position during the action of putting. And the shot should not be taken behind the line of the shoulders. And I still think it's very funny that they have to put this into the rules, that cartwheeling techniques are not permitted. And if anybody wants a really good laugh, go to YouTube and look for cartwheeling shot put techniques. And at one point, it was tried out about people who actually go to the back of the circle and cartwheeling and then throwing the shot, and that was deemed, we won't have that as a technique, but it was there for a while. Just take you through a few examples here. So what I would be looking for is, if you look at the cartoon on the left hand side, you can see there that the shot is nicely pushed into the neck and the chin. That's how we want the shot to start off. Now you can see here it's forward of the shoulders, which is good, and there's good contact. Now you as a judge are actually looking for this. Now you might have a left-hander. So how do you judge a left-hander? Well, what you should really do is walk around the circle and actually judge this from the other side of the circle. So if you remember, I showed you in where the judges were shown, that this would be judge 1 and 2 could actually be looking at either side of this. But really, if you have a left-hander, you should really move your position to be able to observe that the shot is actually into the neck. Now, if we go to the next picture with the guy who's holding the small red shot, you can see here that has come away from the neck, and that would be called a foul. And as I know it's hard to see because it's side on, but you could imagine that's a significant distance away from the neck. It's almost at the shoulder point. If you go to the guy wearing the yellowy greeny shirt, again, you can see that shot put is significantly away from the neck, and that would be called a foul. And the two things, well, the one thing which is in common between those two is that the elbow is dropped. And you often see this with an athlete where the shot comes away from the neck. It also you often see a drop of the elbow as it's actually pulled away. Now, it both is a foul, but also you risk doing damage to yourself. So you can easily cause a shoulder injury if you're actually throwing from that position and not up against your neck. Now, this next one is a tough one. So this little happy fella here throwing the shot, you might say that that is actually,
No.
in the neck of the shot, and you would call that a good throw. But I would argue that look where the shot now is. So look to the cartoon and see where the shot should be, up against the neck and against the chin. That has come a significant distance away from the neck and the chin. It's up around his ears now. So that has significantly moved away. And I would say that his elbow has also dropped. And on the end, we can see Ryan Krause here. And it looks like that shot is well away from his neck, but that's actually the actual natural act of putting the shot. He's pushing it clean away from his body. He's actually engaging in the technique. His elbow is up. It's not dropped below the level of his shoulders. It's not gone back behind his shoulders. That is a good throw. Assistance. So we'll talk about assistance. So this top one here is a rule that has recently been brought in, obviously post-COVID, but I think it is something which we definitely as officials need to be fully aware of. No spitting or application by the means of human body fluids on the implement is permitted. You may say that, okay, I want to spit on my own shot. It's me who's throwing it. That is until an official has to pick up that shot. And an official is now then sort of like putting their hands over where you just spat or licked on the shot put. So the rule there is you would give a warning on the first time that you see this. And on the second time, if somebody persists to do it, you are only right to show them a red card and disqualify that athlete. We did mention it at the long throws to people, and a lot of people who are throwing are very much unaware of this. So I think there's an education to be done over this next year in terms of getting people to understand that there is no spitting or other bodily fluids on the implement. The taping of 2 or more fingers together is not permitted. The taping has to be continuous. So no 2 fingers should be taped together, such that the individual fingers cannot be moved individually. If anybody's taping their hands, they should actually show it to the chief judge. And the chief judge also should be looking around their athletes and looking for anybody who is actively taping. It is a big thing in shot put at the moment that people are taping their hands more and more and more. And I think we need to be careful of that. You can put a substance, usually chalk, on the hands, and a shot putter can actually put that substance on their neck as well. You need to make sure that whatever sort of substance you use can easily be removed by a wet cloth and doesn't leave any residue. So some of these wet chalks that people use, they don't come off very, very easily, and spray sort of glue type thing, it can't be allowed because that you can't actually remove that easily with a wet cloth. So I just give a couple of examples here. So on the left hand side is a lovely clean hand, no taping here at all the fingers can individually move from each other. That's good. Second picture, you can see that the 2 fingers in the middle have been taped together so that the fingers can't independently move from each other, and that's not allowed. So that athlete would have to be asked to remove that tape from their fingers. The next one is, I'm seeing this more and more at the moment. So one of the rules of shot put is you can't wear a glove, but you are now allowed to tape your hands up to the extent where you're effectively wearing a glove. That you can't see that that's the black and white photograph, but that was actually blue surgical tape that was actually being used, or physiotherapy tape that was actually being used around the hand and all around the fingers and on the thumbs as well. And that's not that actually is allowed. That is completely valid. All the fingers can move independently, and it can be easily removed. Now this one at the very, very end is exactly the same as the one before it, except you'll see there's an additional piece of tape between the middle 2 fingers. And I had an athlete recently presented with this, and I told them they had to remove that bit of tape in the middle because it was deemed that the bottoms of the fingers were not able to move separately from each other, and they were actually forming a joined like platform at the bottom of their fingers. And so I asked that athlete to make a rip in that so that the fingers could move independently, and that's exactly what they did. A valid throw. It's a fail when, obviously the shot touches the sector line or anything past the sector line. Here's a rule which, again, people aren't usually aware of. That the implement, and this actually doesn't often happen with shot, but the implement has to have actually landed before the athlete leaves the circle. And it shall be a failure for throws made from a circle. When you leave the circle, you don't leave behind that white line, the 75-centimeter white line, 50 millimeters wide, which is running through the middle. And I think that we're all aware when we officiated at shot put that we make sure that people actually leave behind that line. So just to show, those there. So you have 3 foul throws. Even the third one there is just about touching the sector lines, but it's actually touching the sector line, so that is a foul. And the only good one there is the one which is on the very right-hand side, which is nowhere near the sector lines. And again, at the front of the circle, after the throws we made, is bad, and at the back is good. Thing to be aware of, and I've seen this a number of times, if a shot put actually lands on the sector line, it can displace the sector line. And it can displace the sector line to the point where it actually comes into the sector. So therefore you don't have, the correct separation. So keep an eye on your sector lines. And if they're coming in and in and in, it should reset the sector lines to make sure they are still the correct separation. It's only fair on the athlete that they do actually get the sector which they are permitted to throw in. The athlete must exit the circle under control. Absolutely not. This is not a rule. And this is something which needs to be taken out of people's sort of mind, that this is a rule. An athlete, there are only 2 rules about how an athlete must exit the circle: behind that center line and after the implement has landed. You can do a backflip singing Yankee Doodle Dandy at the back of the circle, and that is completely allowed. You can throw your shot, stumble, and fall out the back of the circle, and that is completely allowed. There is no such rule in the rule book that says the athlete must exit the circle under control. Just as long as the shot has landed and as long as you exit out the back. Okay, so now we come to what often is referred to as the Krauser rule. So it shall be a failure if an athlete, in the course of the trial and has begun to make a throw, touches with any part of the body the top inside edge of the rim or the ground outside the circle. However, for rotating shot putters, this is actually allowed. If during their first rotation they do make a touch on the ground outside the circle. Also, if you touch the top of the stop board with your shoelaces, that's not a foul throw. If you touch the top of the shot board with a cap that falls off, that's not a foul throw. So a rotator can actually touch the outer part of the top of the rim and the outside the circle if it's behind the midpoint. If they make that touch past the midpoint, then yes, absolutely, it is a foul, but there is an allowance to touch the outside. Also, before making a throw, if you walk into the circle, you assume your stationary position, but you have not started your throw. You are totally in your rights to place that shot down, exit the circle, return into the circle and pick it up, assume your stationary position, and then commence the throw, as long as it's actually done within the time limit. Where you can't do this is if you've actually already commenced the throw. But if you're waiting to even start your throw, then you can put the shot down and walk out. So just show some of those rules. And so obviously the first one on the left-hand side is probably one of the most contentious photographs in shot put over the past few years, with Ryan Krauser obviously putting his foot down on the outer circle and there's making a definite contact there. It used to be that if you made any forward propulsion, that could be viewed as a foul, but that is a very subjective rule, and so people aren't. So that has been removed now to remove that subjectivity. And on the second picture across, again, this is Krause at the US Olympic trials. And again, he obviously makes contact with the outside of the circle by putting his foot down. At the same Olympic trials, in fact, it was actually the same throw. Krause's hat came off, hit the stop board, and landed on the rim. And so many people on every forum and everything like were calling foul, foul, foul. But no, that's actually not a foul. And I thank Ronan for this picture because I spent hours trying to find this picture the other day. It is of an athlete whose shoelaces are on top of the stop board. That is not a foul. If their foot was on top of it, then absolutely it would be a foul. But the fact that their shoelaces are there, it makes no difference to the throw if their shoelaces are on the top there. So that is a valid throw. Raise the white flag for that one. In fact, all of those throws you would actually be raising the white flag for. So just a few more slides now. So measuring the throw. So what you do is you find out where the shot put lands, and you are putting your spike in the first position where or the first mark that the shot put has actually made. And you can see here on the right hand side, this is one that we threw in training the other day, and you can see that the shot put was still in the mud because it was actually quite squelchy there still, but you can see that the first mark that it actually made was actually just slightly further up. So you wouldn't actually be marking where the shot put was, you'd actually be marking roughly in the middle of that circle there. If you're using a tape, the person at the back will actually pull that tape through the center point of the circle from where the shot put is actually marked, and the tape is actually read at the inside edge of the stop board. And you read it to an exact centimeter, but you always round it down. So if on the tape measure it says 12.995, the throw is recorded at 12.99. If the tape measure reads 12.999, you would still record that as 12.99. So how would you record that on your card? You would write, okay, so you would actually write it to the meter and centimeter. So 5 meters, 36 centimeters. You would actually write that down on your card. If it was a foul, you would just put an X. And if they didn't throw because they passed or they timed out, then you would put a dash. There should be no other markings really on the card apart from a distance, an X, or a dash. So in standard competition, all athletes will have 3 throws. And if there are more than 8 athletes, then the top athletes will receive an additional 3 throws, actually, not an additional throw, an additional 3 throws. And the throwing order of those last 3 throws is determined by the rank at the end of the first 3 throws. So what you will do after the first 3 throws, you will look at your card and you will rank the athletes in order 1 to 8. And what you will have is then in the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds, the first athlete to throw would be athlete rank number 8, then number 7, then number 6, and then the last person to throw will be the person that threw that was ranked number 1. There is no further re-ranking of the athletes after that first 3 throw point. So how do you resolve a tie? Well, if 2 athletes are tied at the same distance, then you would go to the next longest throw to resolve the tie. And this often happens, actually. If the tie still remains so that the 2 longest throws are identical between the people you're trying to resolve the throw, you simply just go to the next longest throw and so on and so on. And if all throws are identical, and I must say I've never ever seen this, then you would award a joint place. Now, if you are after your first 3 throws and you're trying to determine who are your top 8, if you find that there are 2 athletes who have the exact same distances for all their 3 throws, so you can't separate them on a tie, you just simply put 9 athletes through. And there's no problem with that. You just let the referee know, and you would record that, and you would put all of the athletes through. And that would be the same, right? If you had 3 athletes who had the same, 3 throws, you would just keep putting them through because you don't resolve the tie by those first 3 throws by a toss of a coin or anything like that. You just put them through. Right, I've got some scenarios here. So Jackie, is there any questions turned up?
Just 2 questions, but I've popped the answer to those into the chat, Ian. But I just to be aware that we're at 10 to 9 now.
Yep, that's fine. So what I will do,
if you'd like to continue popping your questions into the chat, feel free, and we'll come to them now very shortly. Thanks Ian for the presentation.
Okay, so I've just had 3 scenarios. What I'll do is I'll actually just go through these and just give the answers straight away, right, rather for the sake of time. And these 3 scenarios, so the first 2, for anybody who's about to do the World Athletics Referee Bronze, you will notice the first 2 of these, right? So during the warm-up for a shot put, an athlete asks if they can tape 2 fingers together just for the warm-up. Is this allowed? So if you remember, we said that in a competition throw that no 2 fingers can be taped together. For a warm-up, absolutely, that is completely allowed. An athlete can tape their entire hand together if they really wanted to for the warm-up throw, but when it comes to the actual throw-in, the competition throw, you have to have all your fingers separate. Now this question has an answer now, has a different answer from 6 months ago. And I'll just go through those and show you what the difference is, because this will affect, particularly on the athlete side, as much as the officials. So an athlete, a female athlete, I should say, brings a 4 kg shot to the TIC. They're a senior woman. The implement is red in colour, and the athlete tells the official that it is a Gill Athletics Perfect Balance Steel Shot Certificate I150762. And on checking the World Athletics implement list, the official notices that the implement is actually written as yellow in colour and refuses to accept it. The athlete protests, and so the scenario here was actually how would you react to that? Well, the answer from 6 months ago would kind of be different to now, because it used to be that if you bought to competition an implement which was already on the World Athletics implement list for that competition, you couldn't introduce that implement into the competition pool. It was already there. You could only bring implements in that were actually not on that implement list for that competition. Now, in the, I think it was the November 2023 rules, that they allow that. But here, you know, the athlete protests, how would you react? Well, as long as that shot, irrespective of the difference in the color between the what the color of the implement actually is and what it says on the list, as long as that implement meets all the basic checks, it's the correct weight, it's the correct diameter, it has the center of balance in the correct place, you would allow that implement to be introduced into competition. The one thing I didn't say earlier on is that for shot puts, if all shot puts can be used by all competitors, so if you bring a shot to a competition, that has to be allowed to be used by, or potentially be used by, all the athletes in the competition. It's the only throw-in implement that currently still has that rule. So it has to be put into the pool and available to all the athletes. An athlete enters the ring, assumes a stationary position, and drops the shot, which then rolls out the circle. The athlete steps over the toe board to retrieve it and recommences their throw. As the chief judge, what is your response? Well, the response here is the athlete has entered the ring. It doesn't matter how they enter the ring. They've assumed a stationary position, but they haven't started their throw. Now, they've dropped the shot for whatever reason. It's the same as being able to put the shot down and walk out the circle yourself. So here, because the athlete hasn't started their throw, it doesn't matter whether they've stepped over the toe board to retrieve it. As long as they come back within the 1 minute they're permitted, they can actually recommence that throw. And I saw this kind of happen in Jerusalem in July 2022, where an athlete actually picked up a shot and it had been actually out in 50-degree+ heat all morning, and they picked up the shot and they put it to their neck, and as it touched their neck, they dropped it because it was so hot, and it was actually given as a foul. And there was a big protest about this, and unfortunately the protest wasn't upheld, and the athlete was actually given a red flag for that because it was deemed they had actually started their throw, which was debatable at the time, but they did actually just drop the shot. So that's it for me. I'm open to any questions and answers, and I realize I've gone on for a bit longer than what I thought I was going to do, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian, for that really comprehensive response. And there's just there was 3 questions into the chat which we've taken responses to. I think the last one there from Angela is quite an interesting one. That a mistake has happened. The card hasn't been resolved at the time that after the third trial. And look, if a mistake has happened and the competition hasn't concluded, then you let that athlete take those 3 trials. And thanks Ronan for popping that answer in quickly, just to save us time. Yes, absolutely. The slides will be shared, Moira, and we have recorded tonight, so we will also pop that up in the next couple of days onto the Athletics Ireland YouTube, and it'll be available there for you to look back on it. I'll just give people another couple of moments. I'm aware of the time, and if you want to unmute, if you don't want to spend the time typing in, we're very happy for you to unmute your microphone there and ask. And I'll just give a couple of minutes on that just to give people time. But I think it's a very comprehensive presentation tonight from Ian, and thank you very much, Ian, for that presentation. And again, Rosemary, Rosemary, do you want to unmute yourself there and ask a question?
Can you hear me?
We can indeed, Rosemary. Go ahead.
Just a question. Can athletes, I missed maybe the first 2 minutes, can athletes use other people's shots in the competition?
Yes, absolutely. It's the only throw-in implement, I think, which is still which still says in the rules that any shot put which is actually introduced into the pool should be available for all of the athletes to use.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. Good question, and one that does come up, I think, particularly in juvenile competition. So thank you for that. I don't see any other questions there, and I am aware of the time. So with that, I am going to close the webinar for this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. The slides and this recording will be shared, and all that leaves me to do is just to once again thank Ian and thank you for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you, and
very good evening to you all.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining.
Okay, thank you very much. Very useful.